Okay, we actually want to keep going on the topic of modeling today, and we want to have a deeper look into polygon modeling. Now, if you have watched the very first Introduction to Cinema 4D tutorial from me, you actually came across the parametric modeling. And what the parametric modeling does, just as a reminder again, is basically what you could expect from toy block building. You just have a few basic objects which you can use to build some simple objects by yourself. However, this is pretty boring actually, and you can only use it to build very simple objects or some very simple base objects for which you can use later on to add some more details. But in the end, you're really restricted to simple objects. And then in the last session, in the spline modeling session, we have gone one step further. We had a look into how we can build more detailed objects, a little bit more organic shaped objects maybe, and we used the spline modeling methods for that. And today we want to go even one step further and have a look into the polygon modeling, where we can actually build whatever we want and are not restricted to anything actually. However, what you have to keep in mind is, as I have illustrated on this slide, the complexity of it is increasing. So when you use the parametric modeling, it's actually quite simple. The drawback, of course, is you can only build simple objects. When you go to spline modeling, it's a little bit more complicated. You have a few things more to think about and to keep in mind, but you have more freedom and you can build cooler objects. And then it comes to polygon modeling, which is indeed a little bit more complex and need a little bit more of experience for you to master. But let's start in the very beginning, at the very base, so that everyone is on the same ground here. When we speaking of 3D software or in Cinema 4D specifically, we or the smallest entity we are dealing with is actually a small point in our 3D world, and we also call that a vertex. Now you know that from school probably. We can use 2 points to illustrate a line, and we call that an edge also in 3D software. Now we can use the same method and duplicate those points, and what we get now is, of course, we get a few more edges, but now we also have built a surface, and to this surface we also refer to as a polygon, and I'm sure you have heard of that before. Now we can go one step further and now use those polygons to create a 3D object by combining them together. As you see here, we build a little cube, and yeah, this is actually the very in basic terms the way we build 3D objects. And we refer to that also as an object or a model. Now let me sum that up for short. So when we talk about a model, we can also refer to it as an object or a mesh, and it is always made out of surfaces, also called polygons. And those surfaces are always enclosed by edges, and those edges are always defined by multiple points, also called vertices. So that's what an object is made of. And we can use this method to build, as I said in the beginning, whatever we want. We can build simple objects like the pyramid on the left. We can use it to build more complex objects like the sphere in the middle, or we can even build something really detailed like this mannequin here on the right side. However, it's quite a bit of work if we would use a technique called point-by-point modeling, where we really literally add point after point or surface after surface to build those kind of objects. So this is actually where the parametric objects come in again. So we already have those kind of objects in Cinema 4D ready for us, and we can use them to add more details to them and go a few steps further. What you have to keep in mind though is that we cannot just use the parametric objects and add details. We have to make it editable first, and I think this is like one of the major thing to understand, that we have two different state of objects. We have an initial state, for example the parametric object, and when we make it editable it's actually a polygon object. And let me illustrate that you for a second. So for example, when I have a cube in my scene, now see that it's a parametric object, and in the attributes manager you see the different parameters which I can change to edit or change the form of my cube. Now let's say I want to use the parameters to build something like this, like a cube with a width of 350 centimeters. Okay, so this is pretty easy. Now let's say we want to do the same thing, but now use the technique of polygon modeling to achieve the same thing. Now this is just a really simple example for you to understand the difference between a parametric object and a polygonal object. Okay, so let me just add another cube, and I move it a little bit to the back so that you can see that we're actually doing quite the same thing. Now you see it's still in the initial state, it's still parametric, and I have to go to this button over here or use the C key on the keyboard to make it editable. And now you see on the icon here over in the object manager that it's now a polygon object. And what I can do now is I can literally enter or access the polygons and change it. So for example, I can use the point mode, and with the live selection tool selected, I can select all the different points of my cube, and then again actually use all the transformation tools we have in Cinema to, for example, move those points around. Now I can also go into the edge mode and use this to transform the position of the edge, or I can go to the surface mode and select the surface and then move it in one direction. And now you see we get pretty much the same thing than we would do with the parametric object. I just moved the surface in a certain direction, and then I got my my new cube. So the same thing is true for the spline objects or the NURBS we talked in last session about. So let's say we want to build something simple like an extruded circle. So I use this circle spline and I put it into the extrude NURBS generator. And as I said also in the last session about the spline modeling, we actually have here something which I like to refer to as a self-made parametric object, because we now have again parameters which we can use to easily change the appearance of our object. But now again, if you want to go one step further and add more details to this, you have to make it editable again. And again, I can just go over here to make editable button, click it, and now you actually see that I can see my polygons and points and edges and use them, or could use them to deform this object. Okay, just so much about the difference between the states. So we have an initial state, which would be something like this, and to get into the polygons and to access the polygons, we have to make our objects editable, like so. So another way to describe polygon modeling is by comparing it to making a paper plane. When you build a paper plane, you start off with a plain piece of paper, and then you add detail after detail by folding your paper. Now in the end you hope that your paper plane flies. And in a way the same is true for polygon modeling. You start off with a very basic object like a cube or a sphere, a parametric object for example, or you can use your own NURBS generated object by using the splines. And you make it editable to access the polygons, and then you use a variety of tools to add details to your object. And then in the end you hope it looks good. Now of course you have in Cinema a variety of tools to achieve your goals, and I want to go into the most important ones here. What you have to keep in mind though is in the beginning I think it's a little bit difficult to understand when to use what kind of tool, so you need a little bit of patience and practice to get into it, but yeah, I think a little overview will help you out to get started. So here we go. Okay, we want to start off with the selection tools, which you find over here under the Select tab. And let me get rid of this cylinder first, and I want to add a cube. And what I want to do is from the start off increase the segments, so basically the polygons of that object, by increasing the value of the segments. And what you also probably want to do is to change the display mode, and you find it over here, and you have a variety of different modes to choose from. What I mostly use is the road shading lines. And now you see what we get. We can now see the different segments or polygons, surfaces of our cube. Now the next step is to make that editable so that we get access to our polygons. Okay, now you can see with the live selection tool selected, this is like the basic selection tool in Cinema 4D. We can now use that to select the different points, for example. So it depends in which mode we are in. When I'm in the edge mode, Cinema lets select me the edges of my cube, or if I go to the surface mode, I can now select the surfaces. So keep in mind that you have to switch the modes, and when you're in the model in the object mode, you have not access to the different layers of the polygons. So now you can use the model mode to move the whole model around in your scene, but whenever you want to go into the modeling itself, make sure to go in one of those modes. So to the selection tools. In a lot of cases, or actually in most of the cases, you want to make selections to your polygons in order to change them or to transform them. And you have a variety of tools to choose from again. The most important one, or the most frequently used one, is probably the loop selection. And what the loop selection does, it selects for you a loop of connected points or polygons. So when I'm in the point mode, this looks like something like this. I could, for example, connect all the points on that direction. When I'm in the edge mode, it looks quite similar. I can select a loop of connected edges, or when I switch to the polygon mode, I can select connected surfaces. By the way, you can use the Enter key on your keyboard to switch through the different modes, from the point to the edge to the surface mode. Okay, then you have also the ring selection, which is quite similar, and I really don't know all the difference it makes between the loop selection. What you can do with it, however, is, for example, something like this. You could select not connected polygons which are orthogonal to each other, for example. So that might be useful in some cases, but I rarely use it actually. What I use more often though is, for example, the path selection tool. And with the path selection tool, you can use a path, or you can define a path which you want to select. You just click on the point and then hold your mouse and drag your mouse along the edge of the particular thing you want to select. Now there are a couple of more interesting things to find here in the select menu. So for example, let's say I have selected this those surfaces here on the front side, and I want to invert the selection. That's pretty easy to do. You just go to the select menu and choose invert, or use the combo shortcut of U and I to invert the selection. So this is pretty handy in some cases if you want to invert the selection. Okay, we will go into the most important modeling tools right now, and I want to get rid of that cube for now and add a more simple cube so that we only have 6 surfaces here on our model. Now I make that editable so that I have access to the different surfaces in the polygons. What I might like to mention beforehand is that I will only give you a brief overlook over the tools. When we do exercise later on, you will probably understand a little better what those tools do. But I like to introduce them to you so that you get a broad overview and basic idea of what we're dealing with here. Okay, so I'm in the surface mode and I select this surface, and now do right click again to get access to all the modeling tools. And as I said, what we do now is we want to have a quick overview of the most important ones. And we start off with the bevel, the extrude, and the inner extrude. And let's start with the extrude tool because I think it's the most simple one to understand. So what the extrude tool does is when I click and drag my mouse, it copies my surface and then drags it into a certain direction. So I can also select this surface, for example, do a right click again, choose the extrude and extrude it into this direction. So it basically gets always extruded to the direction of the polygon itself. So for example, let me select this one here. If I rotate my polygon a little bit and I now choose the D key on my keyboard for the extrude tool and I extrude it, you see it keeps the rotation of my polygon and transfers it into the Z direction. For the modeling tools, you have a variety of settings in the attributes manager, but we'll come to that in the later part where we'll actually have to go into it. Okay, so this was the extrude tool. Now I just go back a couple of steps so that we end up with our basic cube again to illustrate you the other tools. So next up, the inner extrude. What the inner extrude does, it also copies my surface, but it only scales it down onto the already existing surface. So what I can create with this is a smaller copy of my original surface, and then I could use it, for example, and move it in a certain direction in or out, whatever I want. Yeah, just click and drag your mouse and then you get the result we want. Okay, so the next tool is the bevel tool, and in some way it's actually a combination of the extrude tool and the extrude inner. So I choose the bevel now, I select now the top, for example, and what you can do now is you can go to the edge, for example, click and drag your mouse again. This gives you the best result for it, I think, and you can move your mouse up to extrude, and this is pretty much the same we saw on the extrude on the extrude tool. But what you also can do is you can move your mouse to the left or to the right to increase the size of your polygon. So I think you get now what I meant with that. This is kind of a combination between the extrude and the inner extrude. Maybe just one thing right here, you can use the attributes manager to change the settings. For example, we could increase the steps our tool does right here. And what you have to keep in mind though is that whenever those polygons are yellow colored, you can use this to change the parameters. But when you go, for example, go to the live selection tool and I select something else, another object or another surface, the changes we made with the bevel tool are now set. We cannot go back into the settings, although if I go to the bevel tool again, I cannot change the settings. You see that now the bevel options are applied again to our surface. So keep that in mind, that as long as you want to make changes to your extrusion or to your bevel, that you keep with it and don't click anywhere else on your viewport, and otherwise you will end up with something I just showed you. I can show you again. You see, if I now change a parameter, it's again applied to that surface. So I go back a little bit again, so that we're back with our basic cube. Now, most of the tools you can not only use in the surface mode, you can also use it in the edge mode, for example. And now do a loop select, go to the select menu, use the loop selection and select the top edge. And now again I can go use the combo key M and S for the bevel tool, or just use the context menu by right clicking, choose the bevel, and again I can click and drag my mouse to bevel the edge here. We come to the bevel tool in more detail in the later part of this tutorial, but for now that should be enough, as it only is a broad overview of the different tools. Another important tool I like to mention is the knife tool. You remember before that when we have the parametric cube, and just let me show you quickly, and there we have the different segment settings or the different values for the segments, and if I increase those, you see that we get different segments on our cube. Now when we have a polygon object, we cannot do that anymore because it's now an editable object and we have to do that by hand. And this is where the knife tool comes into place. So I go to the, it doesn't really matter, but I go to the surface mode, and I use the knife tool in the line mode for now. And what I can do now is I can click and drag my mouse and I can create a cut. So you kind of get the idea what this does. So if we want to create like the segments we did before, I would have, I could do it that way, that I do it manually, go all the way around and add cut after cut to get the result we're after. But there's another mode in the knife tool which is called the loop mode, and again this is similar to the loop selection, and what it does, it lets me loop cut through my geometry, and you see in the offset value right here on the right side the position of my loop selection, or of my loop cut more likely, and if I click, the cut is made, and now I could just roughly go do something we did with our parametric cube and add detail after detail. This is just like poorly made, but you get the idea of the knife tool, hopefully. Okay, just a couple of steps back again. Now there's a different tool we can use to create those kind of those cuts, and this is where actually the ring selection also comes in handy. So if we select those edges over here in the ring selection mode, we can use a tool called connect points and edges. And in the beginning I think it was quite difficult for me also to understand why this happens now, and what you can think of is that the connect points or edges is that it will create a connection for those selected edges by cutting an edge through your geometry. So I select the connect points edges, and now you see I have a new edge or a new cut into our cube, and I can repeat that, and you see we now accurately get the effect we also wanted beforehand, to add more details, more cuts into our geometry. Now let's do that also in this direction for just demonstrating purposes. Okay, so here we are. Again, we have now a more detailed kind of cube. So again, I just go a little bit back in history here. Another nice tool is the slide tool. With the slide tool, you can select a particular edge, for example, and move it around on your mesh. Now again, I could use the loop select tool to select the whole edge, and then use the slide tool to move this cut along my object. Okay, so another example is, let's say you have deleted a certain polygon in your object. So but just by hitting the delete key on your keyboard, I can delete a certain mesh. Now let's say we want to build that up again. There are a couple of ways to do it. We could go into the context menu again and use the simple close polygon hole, and pretty much Cinema 4D does all the work for us. Now in some cases it is a little bit more complicated. You have a little bit more of a detailed geometry, and the close polygon hole command will not work. So what you can use then is the bridge tool. And the bridge tool works in the point mode, because you need the access to the points. And what you do is you click and drag your mouse over to another point, and then you go to the other side of the particular points you want to create the polygon, and click and drag your mouse again, and then you see the polygon is now closed. So whenever you want to close a hole in your geometry, you want to come to the bridge tool most probably. Okay, here's another scenario, and for that I just delete the cube. So let's say we have a cylinder right here, and I just make it a little bit smaller, and I make it editable. And now when I zoom in a little bit and I go to the surface mode, and I select all the surfaces here on the top, and I move them up, you see that our polygons are not connected. Now the reason for that is that the cylinder uses something called caps. So in the caps, if I deactivate that, you see that now the cylinder is have no top and no bottom surface. So this is why you can activate the caps to get that. However, Cinema does not connect the geometry of your cylinder and the cap together. So to do that, there are also a couple of ways, and as we're talking now about the polygon modeling thing, I only want to show you the polygon modeling way. So I make that editable again, and it's actually pretty easy. The only thing we have to do now to connect those points together is a command called optimize. So now I click that, and now you didn't see anything change, but if I select the polygons again and I move that up, you now see the polygons are connected. This is also quite useful, for example, if you want to get rid of unused points. So just as for an example, let's say we select all the polygons right here, and I go ahead and delete all of them. If I go back to the point mode, you see, however, that the points are still there. And to get rid of those, or by the way, just they're not connected anymore by any edge or polygon. And so I can use the optimize command to get rid of them. So when you're facing the problem of an object which has not connected surfaces, or you have unused points in your geometry somewhere, you can use the optimize command to get rid of them. I also delete now the cylinder in my objects manager. Okay, for the next tool, I just go ahead and add a cube again, and I increase the values of the segments a little bit. Again, I make it editable, and what I want to show you now is the Stitch and Sew tool, and it's basically a tool used to reduce the details of your geometry. So what you can do is you can select a point and move it over to another point, and then those points get merged together. And as you can see, if I continue to do that over here, that we actually make out of our 4 polygons one big polygon. So I use it to, in a way, clean up my geometry. You see, it's kind of a little bit of work, but well, welcome to the world of modeling, polygon modeling. Sometimes, well, it's just a little bit of work to do to get to the point where you're heading. So I stop it right here. I think you get the idea. So if you want to merge 2 points together, you can use the Stitch and Sew tool. Now I come back to my knife tool in the line mode, and I purposely will add a cut right here so that we get those 2 triangles. By the way, triangles is something which you actually don't want to have when it comes to modeling in the 3D software. We'll learn later in another session why triangles are so bad and why we at all time want to avoid them. So for now, I just want to show you a method to merge 2 surfaces together. So I switch to the surface mode, and a little bit like the Stitch and Sew tool, a way to clean up your geometry is to use the dissolve tool. The dissolve tool, you need to select firstly the 2 polygons or a variety of polygons you want to merge together, and then do right click and choose the dissolve function. And as you can see now, the edge is gone in the middle, and we now have a nice and clean polygon again. Okay, the last tool I want to mention is the Polygon pen. And the Polygon pen is kind of a tool to master them all. And you can do quite a lot of things with it. And just a really quick example would be on the simple cube. By holding down the command key, for example, you can easily deform the cube in each direction you want. So you can easily change the size of your cube, for example. And this is just a really simple example of the Polygon pen. And I actually want to refer here to the help file, because it would be a little bit too much for this tutorial to go all in the details about the Poly pen. And at this point, I want to refer to the great help Cinema 4D offers. So you can just go to the Show Help menu, open up the Polygon pen entry, and read a little bit through it and see all the things the Polygon pen can do for you. I'll maybe cover the Polygon pen just in another session where we have a little bit more time at hand. Yeah, but for now, if we want to find out a little bit more about the Polygon pen, just go through the help and read a little bit through it. Okay, here's a little exercise for you to make yourself familiar with the different tools I just showed you. Open up your cinema and just try to create a few arbitrary objects you see like you see here on the picture, by using the bevel, extrude, inner extrude tool, and also maybe try to find out by yourself a little bit of the different attributes you can set in the different kind of tools, like the preserve group option and the maximum extrude angle. And then on a later session I will cover them, but yeah, sometimes it's quite good to find stuff also out by yourself. Okay, one thing though, if you have a look at that particular edge, maybe you just think about it, what makes it look good. Especially now if I show you another picture of the same model of that radio over here. Now you kind of see what makes it look so good in the first picture, and it's actually that we have a beveled corner right here on the edge. So on this picture over here we have just a plain 90-degree angle, and this looks kind of strange, and you wouldn't see something like this in real life. That would be like a razor sharp edge. So to make something which is more appealing to the eye, you want to bevel your edges to make them kind of rounded in a way. And this is a major thing to keep in mind if you create good, or want to create good looking 3D models. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do this, and yeah, just to remind you that if you want to create realistic looking objects, you have to think of the bevel your edges. So there are basically 3 different ways to achieve this. So back to Cinema, I just get rid of that cube and I just start off with a basic cube again. Now the most simple way to do it, whenever you're dealing with a parametric object, is to use something called the fillet of your parametric object. You can just click the checkbox, activate it, and by decreasing the radius you can see that the radius of the edge gets smaller, and you can go down with the subdivisions also, depending on how many details or how good looking you want your object to be. I usually stick with something around 3 to 5. That's mostly totally fine. So this is like the most easy way to do it. The problem though is, now if you turn your object and make it editable, you have already quite a lot of polygons in your on your cube. Now for example, let's say we want to do something like this. We want to extrude, we want to inner extrude a little bit and then extrude out, and now we want to bevel those edges again. Well, we can't do that anymore because the object is of course not parametric anymore, so we don't have access to that fillet anymore, and we have kind of a problem right now. We must do it per hand, and we have the problem that we have already set kind of a radius right here, and now we have to do it with hand, and it could get a little bit messy. So actually the better way to do is to do it the other way around. So I just go back to my basic cube again, and without the fillet selected, I just make it editable and now do the kind of transformation I wanted to do, something like this, and voila, we have the kind of object we wanted to create. And now we want to add the bevel, and since I think Cinema 16 we have the bevel deformer, so I just add the bevel deformer to my cube, and now you see that it actually we actually have kind of the bevel going on. I increase a little bit the amount of subdivisions to 3 again, and the offset is okay for now. Maybe I just increase it a little bit so that you see it a little better. Now we only have one problem left now. This is that we have a bevel going on also in this direction here, and if I render it, you kind of see it. So we want to get rid of this as well, and to get rid of this we have to activate the use angle functionality. And because we only want the bevel to to show on a certain angle, basically on a 90-degree angle. So I can turn that basically up to the 19 degrees, so the bevel is still active. You see that if I go to 91, it doesn't bevel the edges anymore. So yeah, just go to 89 or 90 is also fine. So this is like a little bit like the lazy way, but a good way if you have a simple object like this to get beveled corners into your object. What I want to show you now is actually the proper way to do it. So we now do it by hand manually, and to do that we have to select the edges we want to bevel, and I go to the edge mode for that, and I select the loop selection. I have to get to activate my cube for now, and then I go to loop selection, and I actually want to select basically everything. So I just hit Command A on my keyboard and I select everything. So I didn't actually need the loop selection tool for that, but I want to get rid of those diagonal edges. So I hold down the Control key and just deselect those edges. And now we come back to the bevel tool I showed you before. So I do a right click and then we go to the bevel. I go to edge again and just click and hold your mouse and move a little bit around, and now you see the edges are beveled. And now you can go to the attributes manager and decrease or increase the values as you prefer. And well, this would be kind of the manual way. There is actually another method to do that, but we'll cover that in the next session. And this will be the using the subdivision surface object to get that kind of look we also have here. Okay, so just a quick wrap up. We have had 3 different ways to bevel our objects. We have the parametric objects with the fillet checkbox to do it really quickly on the parametric objects. We have used the bevel deformer to get the kind of look, and we did the manual way by selecting all the edges we want to bevel and then using the bevel tool to do it. Now again, if you deselect your object and you want to come back to it, there's no way to do it. So your beveling is now set, you cannot change it anymore, so keep that in mind if you want to use the bevel tool. So this kind of the difficulties you will face when you do polygon modeling, that if you do something like this, there's not really a way back. So you kind of have to think in advance and beforehand before you do something, and this is why a little bit of experience is necessary to do the kind of things you want to do. Okay, here's again a roundup of the whole session we did today. So as I said, the polygon modeling is actually one of the most difficult parts of modeling, but the good thing is you can create any object you have in mind. Keep in mind the 2 states of the objects. You always have to convert your basic object to your polygonal object before you can edit it and have access to the different polygon modes, like the point mode, the edge mode, and the surface mode. And yeah, to create realistic looking objects, you have to bevel your edges. Keep that also in mind. So unless you want to create something maybe for the game industry or for a small game you do by yourself, you want to bevel those edges. Yeah, we taught that the 3 different modes you can work in: the point, edge, and the polygon mode. And I also mentioned it on the side. I think there are actually different modeling techniques, for example the box modeling or the edge extrude, but we'll come to that in another session where I'll go through building a complete radio step by step, and I will mention again the different modeling techniques we can use. Okay, thank you for listening. Have a good day.